The first thing to understand is that this was a very different world from ours. The people of ancient Greece were not like us today. They were much more tribal and were more concerned with honor and glory than we are. And so when a war broke out, it wasn't just about winning or losing. It was also about who was to blame for the war and who was responsible for ending it. And it wasn't just the Greeks who were obsessed with honor and glory. The Achaemenid Persians were just as bad. In fact, they were even worse. They weren't even Greek, so they didn't have any concept of honor. All they cared about was power. When the Corinthian War broke out between Athens and Sparta, the Achaemenids saw an opportunity to make some land, and they jumped at it. At first, they helped out Sparta because Sparta was closer and weaker, but then Athens came in and made peace with them, so the Achaemenids switched sides. This might sound confusing, but trust me, it's not. The Achaemenids were just looking out for themselves. They didn't care who they helped as long as it got them what they wanted. In the end, they ended up controlling the Aegean Sea, and that gave them access to the riches of the Greek city. But their influence went far beyond the sea. They had agents everywhere, even in Athens and Sparta. And these agents would do anything to get their hands on power, even murder. That's right. When the fighting was over and the allies of Sparta were meeting together to decide what to do next, the Achaemenid king sent his agent into the middle of the assembly and killed the Spartan king's brother. Now that's cold-blooded murder if I've ever seen one. But it gets worse. After he killed the king's brother, the agent didn't even try to run away. He just stood there and waited for the Spartans to arrest him. And when they did, he said, "You can't do anything to me." He told them that he was the ambassador of the great king Darius, and that if they harmed him, Darius would declare war on Sparta. Now, this was a big problem for the Spartans. On the one hand, they didn't want to go to war with Persia again. They had fought against them before, and it hadn't gone well. But on the other hand, this guy had just murdered one of their most important people, and they couldn't let that go. In the end, they decided to play hardball. They threw the Persian ambassador in jail and said, "If you want to declare war, go ahead. We're not afraid of you." Now, this was a risky move. The Spartans knew that if the Persians did declare war, they would have to fight on two fronts. Not only would they have to worry about the Persian army coming through the land, but they would also have to worry about the Persian navy coming through the sea. But the Spartans were confident that they could handle the Persians. They had a strong army and they were willing to fight. But the Persians never did declare war. Instead, they made a deal with Sparta. Now, this was a humiliating deal. The Persians basically told the Spartans, "You're not strong enough to rule over the Greeks, so why don't you let us do it instead?" The Spartans agreed. And so the Achaemenids took control of the Aegean Sea. They also got to keep the Persian ambassador, which meant that the Spartans had to pay a lot of money to get him back. But despite all this, it was a good deal for the Spartans. You see, the biggest threat to Sparta was Athens, and by making peace with the Persians, Sparta was essentially getting Athens to agree to stop being a naval power. That's because Athens had lost its empire and was now just a city. The Spartans didn't want Athens to become a naval power again, and the Achaemenids agreed to help them prevent that. Now, you might be wondering why the Athenians agreed to this. Why would they give up their empire? Well, it's because they didn't have a choice. The Achaemenids had blockaded their ports and were threatening to invade. Athens had nowhere to turn. They couldn't ask Sparta for help because Sparta hated them, and they couldn't ask the other city-states for help because they had all sided with Sparta. Athens was completely isolated, and they knew that if they didn't give up, things would get much worse. In the end, the Achaemenids won the war and they got everything they wanted. They controlled the Aegean Sea, they had Athenian prisoners, and they had the allegiance of Sparta. But their victory was short-lived. The Achaemenids didn't stay in power for very long. You see, they were too weak to hold on to their empire. As soon as a new and stronger power came along, they lost everything. And that new power was Macedonia. Macedonia was a small kingdom north of Greece, and they were always jealous of the Greek city-states and their culture. In 336 BC, a Macedonian king named Philip II came to power. He was a brilliant military commander, and he used that skill to take over the entire Greek mainland. By 335 BC, he had defeated the Spartans, and by 334 BC, he had defeated the With both Athens and Sparta defeaters, Philip II was the most powerful ruler in Greece. The Achaemenids tried to stop him, but they couldn't. Philip II was just too strong. He defeated them on land and on sea, and then he marched into the Persian Empire and took over. The Achaemenid Empire was no more. But despite their short time in power, the Achaemenids had a big impact on Greece. They introduced the Greeks to new ideas and technologies, and they also helped to spread Greek culture throughout the Middle East. The Achaemenids were a diverse empire, and they were made up of many different cultures and ethnicities. The Achaemenids ruled over a huge chunk of land, stretching from Central Asia all the way to North Africa. Their empire was so big and so diverse that it's hard to imagine how they held it together. But they did it by being tolerant of other cultures and religions. They also used a clever system of roads and communication to keep their empire together. The Achaemenid king Cyrus the Great was known for his tolerance and his respect for other cultures. He allowed people to practice their own religion, and he respected their customs and traditions. He even issued a famous edict granting religious freedom to all people within his empire. Cyrus the Great was also a skilled military commander. He built a huge army, and he used it to conquer a large chunk of land under his rule. The Achaemenids became one of the largest empires in the ancient world. One of the things that helped the Achaemenids to rule over such a large and diverse empire was their communication and road system. The Achaemenids built a huge network of roads that stretched throughout their empire. These roads were used to move troops, to transport goods, and to communicate with the various parts of the empire. The Achaemenids also used a system of relays to send messages quickly throughout their empire. So while the Achaemenids didn't last forever, their impact on the world was huge. They were one of the first empires to embrace diversity and tolerance, and they also developed some of the first sophisticated systems of government and infrastructure. The Achaemenids were an ambitious and powerful empire, but they were also doomed from the start. Their empire was too big and too diverse to hold together, and as soon as a strong power came along, they were easily defeated. The Peloponnesian War was one of the most important events in ancient Greek history. It was a conflict between two of the most powerful city-states in Greece, Athens and Sparta. The war had a major impact on the political landscape of ancient Greece. The main reason for this was that the war led to the decline of Athens and the rise of Sparta. Athens had been the dominant power in Greece during the first part of the classical period, but their empire had become too much of a burden to maintain, and their defeat in the war led to their decline as a great power. Sparta, on the other hand, emerged as the dominant power in Greece after the war, but they were unable to hold on to their supremacy for long. The Peloponnesian War also had a profound impact on ancient Greek culture. The war led to a decline in artistic and intellectual activity in Greece, and it also helped to usher in the end of classical Greek civilization. Despite the negative impacts of the Peloponnesian War, it's important to remember that it also had some positive effects. The war led to a number of technological innovations, such as the development of new weapons and military tactics. It also helped to promote trade and economic activity among the Greek cities. Overall, the Peloponnesian War was a pivotal moment in ancient Greek history. It had a major impact on the political landscape of Greece, and it also had a profound impact on Greek culture. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, Please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching.